This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put the South at the center. This is episode number 12 and recording on the 29th of January at 4 p.m. Remember, the podcast drops every Friday. Do like us on Spotify, Apple platforms, and rating there does not cost you anything. In this week's episode, we discuss Indian media organizations suing OpenAI and ChatGPT. And second, we look at Tamil Nadu's discovery that iron was used in the region at least a millennium before others. This week, we'll also read out letters from our audience, so you can write to us at southcentral@thenewsminute.com. Before I introduce the guest on the show today, a quick announcement. We have the Andaman Nicobar Reporting Fund still running. Rishika Pardikar, an environmental journalist, is there reporting for us. And Bhuvan Malik was also there for around 2 weeks. We'll bring you a bouquet of stories on how the union government is planning a port that really looks unviable when you look at the cost, and environmentally too. We look at all aspects of the port building and many other stories from Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So find the link in the description. Do contribute to the Andaman Nicobar Reporting Fund. And now, on to the guests of the show. My co-host Pooja Prasanna is still missing in action. She is on holiday, and as I said in the last Let Me Explain, unlike Narayanamurthy, Pooja does take leave, but she'll be back very soon. She'll be there for the next podcast. Joining me in the studio is Leena, Reghunath, lawyer and journalist.
Hi, Dhanya.
Joining us from Delhi, the person who made his appearance in the first podcast back again, the CEO and co-founder of Newslaundry, Abhinandan Sekhri.
Reporting for duty, sir. Ma'am.
I'm quite nervous that Guruji Abhinandan is in the studio today.
Between you and Manisha, you all make me sound like a horrible ogre. That's why I get so much of hate online. All your fault.
Are you saying you aren't one?
Okay, fine, yeah.
Okay, laughing. There is a second guest of the day, Sowmiya Ashok. Sowmiya is a journalist who reports on politics, culture, and the environment. She's now teaching at the Asian College of Journalism. She's worked with The Hindu, The Indian Express. She has reported from US, China, Taiwan, and Sri Lanka. But we have her here because we are going to discuss archaeology today. So welcome, Sowmiya, to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So first we will have the headlines, and today, since Pooja's not there, Leena has taken over the duty.
Okay, so here's the top headlines of the week. Corporate leaders back Chris Gopalakrishnan booked under SCST Act. So this case is one that has been filed by Durgappa, who was working at the IISc. He was of the SCST community and he was fired for the complaint was that there was sexual harassment. But he then went to the court saying that the investigation was not conducted under the Supreme Court guidelines. Then there was a Karnataka legislative committee that looked at his complaint and found that he was right, and then asked the IISc to take him back. But when he approached IISc with the orders, he wasn't. He was given threats and caste his abuses, and that's where the case is. And so he has now approached the Civil and Sessions Court, filed an FIR, and the proceedings is on.
So as expected, all the corporate leaders are... I saw Mohandas Pai and others tweeting in support of Chris Gopalakrishnan.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where it stands. The second headline is Anna University sexual assault case. Supreme Court has stalled probe against the cops over FIR leak.
And now the Chennai cops have summoned around 10 reporters who downloaded the FIR of the rape, and the other, I think around 5 people who shared it with others. So the Chennai Press Club has put out a statement today because, Abhinandan, this will be interesting to you. The cops have been seizing the phones of these journalists, those who downloaded the FIR of the rape in Anna University. The cops have seized their phones to check that who did they forward it to, and the press club has said that this is against any guideline and you should not be seizing their phones.
You should go to court, yeah.
Moving on to the next headline from Kerala, 4 women and 3 Christians appointed as BJP's district president in Kerala. This is the 27 new district presidents in Kerala. Of them, 4 are women and 3 Christians. This is great for representation. They've carefully picked from Thrissur, Kottayam and Idukki, 3 Christian district presidents. A good move by the BJP. Next, if he is innocent, who is the culprit? Ask victim's father over the Supreme Court acquittal of Techie's killer. This is a 10-year-old case which has gone where the trial court has given the accused a murder death sentence, and then it was confirmed by the High Court, and now the Supreme Court has reversed it.
Yeah, so for those watching South Central, it'll be interesting for you because this is a case where a techie from Andhra Pradesh was working in Mumbai. It was 10 years ago. She was actually coming back home when she was raped and murdered, and her body was found many days later in a decomposed manner. Now, why I said this matters to listeners of South Central is that this case was taken up by Project 39A. And Anup Surendranath, who heads Project 39A, has been our guest twice. In fact, in the last episode, Anup spoke about their work in going to the Supreme Court against death penalty, where they feel that the prosecution's case was weak. Now, when I read this, I did feel conflicted that, that a man who has been accused of rape and murder has now gotten away with it because the police basically did not mark the evidence properly. So I was asking this to Anup, and he said that your anger should be at the prosecution, which did not do its job.
Right. That is what the Supreme Court also found, gaping holes in the prosecution theory that has led to the acquittal of the person. Next, Hyderabad man who killed wife, chopped and boiled body parts has been arrested. So this is the case where ex-army person chopped and cooked his wife in a pressure cooker. So he has finally been arrested. His wife Madhavi wanted to visit her parents for the festival, and he was disagreeing to the decision and led to an argument and the death. That is what we know so far of the case. Next, IT targets investigative news outlet Reporters Collective and others. They serve no purpose. So now journalism doesn't serve any public purpose, according to the income tax authorities of India.
Yeah, the logic is that any trust or foundation or not-for-profit that has the tax-free certification that you don't have to, pay GST, it should have a public service. There should be some public service involved, and that is why they've cancelled it for all of these. And this is at a time, I'd just like to point out, where there are various state GST councils that have recommended that the GST on news should come down from 18%, because the 18% GST on something like news, which is a public service, it should not be as high as, for example, on other commodities which are not public goods. But clearly the government's understanding of news and the fourth pillar democracy is so warped, which is demonstrated through this order.
So yesterday we found that it's not just Reporters Collective, but another organization called The File. They're based out of Bangalore. They're an investigative outlet. They've also got a similar order saying that their non-profit status will be cancelled. So basically they cannot avail any, tax exemption. But the problem is not in the government saying that you change your tax structure. What we saw happen in previous cases is that they will say you pay in retrospect all the taxes till now. So which means these organizations have no option but to shut down, right? Like how can you pay the taxes in retrospect? And like Abhinandan was saying, digital news has to pay 18% GST.
Yeah.
Print has to pay only 5%.
5%.
So if you take a subscription, for example, and yes, this is a time to take a subscription also to support independent media, we have to pay 18% GST on that.
And also, the retrospective thing, the likelihood of someone going to court and winning is extremely high. Just like when the income tax authorities took my laptop and phone, I won the case. But how many people actually can afford to or have the resources or the privilege and the connection and the social capital to get someone to appear in the High Court in front of a judge for you and win the case? And and this doesn't happen in one hearing. It took 12 to 14 hearings. So imagine if you take a senior counsel, even if you take a very decent senior counsel who will give you a big discount, 1.5 lakh is not a big deal for a senior counsel. 12, 15 hearings, 15 lakh. News organizations that can ill afford to pay their own employees are struggling, will just back off from that, which is why this QR code that is flashing in front of you, subscribe. This is why the News Minute can do what it can do, because it is not dependent on Sarkari ads. So those of you who sit and whine and crib all the time, put your money where your mouth is, take out your credit cards and stop whining and do something.
Yeah, we also have some 27 cases just to add to all this.
Yeah.
Moving on to the final headline, tragic news from Mahakumbh Mela, the stampede, 7 to 10 people dead.
But I think the channels are not giving out the numbers properly. I've been trying to figure out. Everybody's saying death. Like how many people are dead? Nobody's really saying. I saw this in Reuters and BBC, the numbers. Maybe by the time the podcast comes out, we'll have some clarity on the numbers.
Actually, exactly what you're saying is what Manisha's nuisance will be about. I've been following this. You're right. The Indian channels not only are not giving numbers, their reportage on this has been completely uncritical. Their reportage of this is a long bite of Yogi or a long bite of Modi saying don't panic, don't. There is nothing, just like they go and shove their mics to, Saif's maid, that what were you doing, or Saif security guard, or, like they do on other stuff. No accountability is being sought. No numbers are being sought. But if someone tweets something, some opposition member, they will have a primetime debate on that tweet. I'm waiting to see what they'll do tonight though.
Are you waiting for the debate, Sowmiya, or you're just like thrown your hands up in the air and you've said no hopes?
I was just thinking of all the Kumbh Mela coverage I've been seeing purely on social media, and there seems to be glamping going on there now. And I don't hear any of the difficulties of most of the majority of people going there, but there seems to be one section who's happily staying in tents and has a private part of the Ganga to jump into for a holy, expensive snan. So I've just been finding it so problematic also because I teach a bunch of young students now who are all consuming their news on Instagram. So they're getting a very different feel of how things are in UP at the moment.
Have any of you ever been for the Kumbh?
I went to report when I worked at the Indian Express a few years ago, 2019 December. So I have gone as a reporter.
So that was the Ardh Kumbh.
Ardh Kumbh, correct. Not 2019, 2018.
Yeah, you're talking about the Ardh Kumbh, the Mahakumbh, the 12-year one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to one in Varanasi, one of the smaller kumbhs, I guess.
That Banaras, I'm not sure. Banaras, I think probably an Ardh Kumbh happens. I know that Ardh Kumbh happens in Ujjain. I went for the Mahakumbh in 2001 and I took a dubki also at the Sangam. And I saw that Rajnath Singh's faced the same problem that I faced, which is that when you sit down, it's so shallow that you don't completely get submerged. So you kind of have to do that Dandavat Pranam to completely get submerged. And I'm not superstitious, but in case you're wondering why I did, I was like, okay, I'm here for 3 days. And I was told that the Shahi Snan and the Buddh Purnima fell on the same day in 2001. And if you take a dip now, the only other time is 144 years later, because this only happens once in 144 years. I was like, I'm here, it's like an insurance policy. Hopefully I won't need it, but I'm here. I'm a man. I just take off my clothes and jump in. What's there? What's to lose? But now I realize that it was so cold. Again, they are saying this only happens in 144 years. So is everything, every Kumbh, they say it's only once in 144 years, this constellation match-up and all that. So I was basically, I'm feeling a little cheated.
A little cheated, yeah. I'm also feeling a little cheated on your behalf.
It's brave that you even walked into the water. I mean, I was there actually looking at how dirty the Ganga was, and I couldn't believe that people were willingly going and jumping into the water. So very brave of you.
Yeah, on that I've done worse. So yeah, that doesn't bother me. Hygiene is not, up there on my determinants of my actions.
Okay, so we'll go to the first topic of the day, which is about AI. So a lot of Indian media organizations, started with the ANI, they've gone to court against OpenAI, which is the parent company of ChatGPT, and they've said that ChatGPT is using copyright content to train their AI model. ANI's petition, many people have joined in, which includes the Digital News Publishers Association. That's not DigiPub, which me and Abhinandan are part of. Then there's NDTV, Indian Express, Hindustan Times. They've all gone to court. Now, added to that, the Federation of Indian Publishers have also filed a case at the Delhi High Court against OpenAI. Now, the Federation of Indian Publishers has Bloomsbury, Penguin, Cambridge University Press and Pan Macmillan. It also has India's Rupa Publication and S. Chand and Co. Now, very surprisingly, when this hearing came up, I think in the first case, which is the media houses versus OpenAI, the lawyer representing ChatGPT said that the jurisdiction is not in India, therefore the case cannot be heard. Amit Sibal, who was the lawyer. So I'll come to the technicalities later, but first thoughts, Abhinandan. This is not the first time, really, right? We are seeing a lot of litigation like this across the world. New York Times and others have gone to court over this.
So, in fact, as we're recording this, Bloomberg has reported that Microsoft, and I'm quoting from Bloomberg, Microsoft and OpenAI are investigating whether data from OpenAI was obtained in an unauthorized manner by a group linked to DeepSeek. People familiar with the matter said. OpenAI's application programming interface was allegedly used to exfiltrate a large amount of data, potentially violating terms of service. Now, I think this is very interesting because this is like a catch-22. And allow me to explain. The allegation with OpenAI and all these large learning models is that their models have been trained by trawling the web on content and information, and that's how they train. Like, write me an essay in Dhanya Rajendran style. That LLM has gone over all Dhanya Rajendran's articles and will recreate it in her style, or Marquez or Arundhati Roy or whatever style you want. Now, there is no way to prove that this has been done taking my content, right? All these cases are ongoing against OpenAI because the allegation there is, how do you train your models? This is how they've trained them. Now, they will probably come to settlements with the big ones. For example, like, Google has come to, or Meta had come to settle with, these large tech companies came to settlements with the large newspapers in Australia. I think they settled with 2 or 3 of the larger media houses there, because they said all the content that their search engines throw up, etc., are because of us. So they said, okay, we'll share some revenue, but they didn't settle with everybody. 3-4 big ones you settle with and the matter gets resolved. So while these matters are open in other places, the likelihood is that in case these guys settle with some of the big players, then people like you and me don't matter. But the fact is that people like Newsminute and Newslaundry, content has also gone to train these large learning models. Now, the catch-22 that comes up is when they accuse the Chinese, saying that your model has copied of our model, then the question is, your model was trained by what? Essays you wrote. So it's a catch-22. If they are in violation, then automatically I'm in violation. It's like, during the Korea War, I believe that's where the term catch-22 comes from. The only way you could be exempt from not serving in the army in the US was there was a clause, that was clause number 22, that if you're mentally unfit. But to say I'm mentally unfit, you have to be of mentally sound mind, because only a sound person can say that you're mentally unfit. So if I'm saying I'm mentally unfit, then I cannot be of sound judgment to pronounce myself mentally unfit. And if I'm mentally fit and I'm saying I'm mentally fit, you get the contradiction there. So OpenAI is in for that shit. I think what's going to happen is people will copy these LLMs, however they do it, and then if they prove that you guys have copied us, then the question is, how did you become what you became? So I think it's a fantastic little fracas we're going to see, and this anarchy in the digital space is something that for smaller outfits is good, because let these big giants fight it out with each other. I mean, I trust neither parties, but the fact is, let them go at each other, because eventually it is these big monopolies that need to be broken up. And if their stuff can be copied just like they've copied other people's stuff, then they are worth nothing. So that automatically breaks.
Abhinandan, I disagree with you there. I'll come back to you, but I want to ask Leena first. What are the different cases across the globe which are already going on? I think from last year, a slew of cases have been filed, right?
Right. Some of the big cases that we can look here is that is similar to what is ongoing in India right now with all the publishers coming together, is what New York Times had filed against OpenAI, and the case is still going on in the courtroom, where it is on a they're compiling documents to submit. And one of the major places where they are having problems is that they're sifting through what OpenAI has looked at, how it has combed through their data, and to create something that is equal to or that is equal to a New York Times report, or extracts important portions or abstracts of the New York Times reports and produce it for ChatGPT's customers, right? So so they have to produce in the court evidence that shows that this has really happened, that they have trolled through the content. And how do you produce evidence that? So ChatGPT and the New York Times lawyers has been going back and forth on how you will produce this kind of evidence, where ChatGPT gave them it's called a sandbox or something, where they collect all the material that they have used and given it to New York Times to sift through. And New York Times found those evidences, and overnight OpenAI went and deleted those evidences from their sandbox. So that's the kind of backroom negotiations that are happening. There were another case where a couple of other, Bloomberg, I guess, and a couple of other publishers has also gone after New York Times approached the court. They went and they filed it. They filed it saying that the ChatGPT, what it has done is it has taken out the copyright marks from the article so that it can be traced back. So that is also one kind of crime, but it's not as big as using your complete database and recreating it, or using it for your profit. So that's a big question of how they are making profit out of the content that New York Times and its newsroom has diligently, painstakingly, with a lot of investment, monetary investment, put together. But what AI on its hand is saying that this is all fair use, because this is the next big thing on the internet space, and this is the only way that it can collect kind of data is to read through and comb through these reports and understand it. So it's calling itself fair use protection, where they are using this for the betterment of tomorrow. So that's where things are now.
Abhinandan, just to go back to your point where you said that it's like the anarchy in the digital space, and what will eventually happen is that the big guys will fight against ChatGPT AI, right? I just want to point out from our own experience, for example, when the digital media rules were brought in, we all know what happened. The government called some of these people for discussions. For those who do not know, the government of India called some of the people for discussion, saying digital media rules are coming. So what do the big newspapers do? Now, I have this grouse against all the newspapers and TV channels. Basically, their association went to the government and said that, boss, see, if I'm running a newspaper, let Indian Express, Hindu, NDTV, all of them said the same thing, that my website is part of my newspaper industry or my television industry. So don't bring me under digital media. And they nicely pushed us under the bus. And they wanted only us to be brought under digital media. Government, of course, said, hello, get lost. And they put everybody under digital media rules. Now, in this also, if they go to court, let's say ChatGPT at some point says, let us settle this, and they go and have a licensing regime with the big guys. We saw what Google did. Google like when you actually take your telephone and when you do a Google search for your stories, or if you're using an Android or you go to do Google Discovery, Google algorithm actually throws up people with whom they've had some sort of contracts or licensing, news organizations, right? So ChatGPT can also go that way, where they sign up with the big guys, and they will also prioritize the same big guys when it comes to search AI. So how are we the winners in any case?
So here's the thing. You're right on that front, that the big guys, they form this cartel and they throw the rest of them under the bus. But the fact is that in case someone, let's say OpenAI's allegation is true, that the Chinese deep search, what's it called? DeepSeek has been trained using their existing knowledge. Then what stops someone else from also, so to speak, plagiarizing them and creating something? We'll say, okay, we won't use you, we'll use them. The viability of the product comes down, which is why NVIDIA and all these companies that have invested heavily in AI, it tanked. I mean, there's a graph going around which shows how all of them overnight tanked. Their shares tanked because their value is based on the assumption that no one else can replicate this. For example, The Economist had a very interesting podcast a while ago, which said that these large tech companies potentially can be a bigger threat than Rothschild owned all oil, right? That oil company which was then broken up. It was owned by Rothschild, I think that was his name. When the antitrust was created in the US to break it up into all the other petroleum companies because he had monopoly, or what they did with Microsoft. They said this is way more dangerous because, Tesla, a car company, could come up even though the entry barrier to auto is very high, to set up a factory, to set up all that. So if existing car companies form a cartel, no one new can enter. Or the same logic is applied with banking, that banking has a very high threshold of entry. So the existing members can form a cartel and make sure nobody else enters. The logic that Economist article said was artificial intelligence, the amount of data it needs to be trained, if someone were to start now, it would take them 2 decades to catch up with Google and all these guys. They're uncatchable. So they have to be destroyed. But the way to beat that system of catching up with them is to just copy them. So what I'm saying is if Chinese have indeed copied them, someone else will. So we'll need someone else who is more technologically knowledgeable, that what is the tech investment required to just rip them off. But if that is possible, the value of these companies gets decimated. And the other point I want to make is, and again, there are no black and white answers. This is also what happened in the Dunkel draft, which is a story I worked on in the 90s. I don't know if you remember, we have one lawyer here. You remember when the Dunkel, you wouldn't remember, but when the Dunkel draft came in, which was the copyright, not the copyright, but the IPR of drugs. There's, the process patent and the product patent. In India, why medicines are so cheap is that you on essential drugs, etc., just like in the US, they've taken the cost of insulin up, I don't know to what extent. In India, a lot of R&D wouldn't happen because it was possible to rip off a product even though you haven't invested heavily, because pharma companies have to really invest heavily to come up with something. And the logic given in the court at that time was that just like that famous case of a US company patenting neem. Neem comes from India. We came up with the concept of how it is so useful for the teeth in various ways. So the logic was that science is a pool of knowledge. Nobody can claim that they invented penicillin. They can say that, but penicillin's invention is also based on the invention of many other things. An extract of neem or an extract of anything else came from generations and generations of. So science is a pool of knowledge. And that is why they said you cannot give the kind of patents to medicine because it is life-saving, it is essential, and no one can claim that I invented this. Because science, the next generation of inventions depends on what the earlier generation did. Quantum mechanics is based on something that it opposes, Newtonian physics. So it keeps moving that way. I think that same thing is going to be true for this. And eventually someone will say, dude, you haven't come up with this. You are not the source. OpenAI is not the source of this wisdom. Dhanya's pen is, or reporters of ours who wrote all the articles are. You've just copied our articles and come up with some précis writing, which kunji hoti hai. So I think one will have to really rethink the entire laws around this, just like there was that in the 90s, the Dunkel draft carried on for I don't know how long. There were protests, there was marches in Mandi House. The same thing will happen here in digitally, I'm guessing.
So just to add to Abhinandan's point about who rips off whom, I think Americans and American AI companies just get a disproportionate amount of media attention on how they're, building these products. But the Chinese have quietly been doing this for years. We just don't know about them as much as we know about the Americans. And I remember years ago, I read a book called AI Superpowers on how strategically China goes about building what it's setting out to be. In this case, DeepSeek must have been in the works forever. It's not a new thing. And like Abhinandan said, it would have been trained on everything that OpenAI was trained on. There's no doubt about that. So when it comes to legalities of this, I think it's going to be really interesting to say who's going to blame whom for the initial sort of digging up of data from the... I'm thinking I've been living in prehistoric times for a while now, for 2 years. So suddenly thinking in terms of who's excavating things from the internet. But to me, it seems like we just don't know enough about China and their investments, because even Americans are not there right now on the ground to cover China as well as they used to before. So there's a bit of a black box on our understanding of many of these Chinese products as well.
Right. All the interesting comment I have to make is all this artificial intelligence that they so far that US has been championing didn't help them to sort of understand where DeepSeek is going to come from and how it is going to massively trash all its pumped up companies like Nvidia, which was building its own $3,000 personal supercomputer, right? AI based supercomputers, and all over tech giants were buying this for their local operations and small time operations and all of that. So those kind of big plannings and that was in the works is all now crashing, coming down. But also what I wanted to bring into attention is that this someone who's a Nobel Prize winner, Geoffrey Hinton, who's known as the godfather of AI, when he quit Google, and a reason in a podcast, he was saying the same thing, that all these big tech giants and the boss between them is just going to further increase the inequality of power, wealth, information, and all of that, and it's going to be a fertile ground for fascism, what this kind of AI's growth will lead into eventually, because it's an anarchy field right now, as in it's unregulated.
So, Abhinandan, before I come to you, I had interviewed Yuval Noah Harari, who's one of the big, names in the world who I think dislike AI is a very small term to use. He's someone who has really ominous theories about what is going to happen. I'll just read out one line from his book Nexus. He says, "We have now created a non-conscious but very powerful alien intelligence. If we mishandle it, AI might extinguish not only the human dominion on Earth, but the light of consciousness itself." In fact, I kept asking him whether he's being too negative about AI. That interview should drop this week or next week on News Minute and Newslaundry. Abhinandan, what I want to ask you is that AI is saying that this is fair use, right? That you can take some of it. We are giving courtesy. We are, linking back to your publications because you give the source there, and it is fair use. It is not fully copyrighted content. What do you think of that?
Yeah, see, again, the thing is, I don't have a yes or no answer to that. I just think that what is valuable will keep changing. Information by itself will not be valuable. I think who has brought you that information will be valuable from now on. It is like, for example, and there have been such cases, if someone would take a video of a person and use in a documentary film, is that fair use, or are you using my face for your content? This is mine. This whole major case of patents, I mean, it's very fascinating. I think it's, I forget the name of the person, but it was basically some cells that are growing in his spleen. There was a very minor operation that was being done in his body. And there were some cells that were growing which are unusual. The doctor took those out and he realized that those cells he can culture and he can create a cancer fighting or some disease fighting medication from those cells. And he patented the cells from that person's spleen. So those cells are in my spleen, but I could not give them to any pharma company because someone else had patented my body. And the Supreme Court in the US upheld that patent. Now, at that time, it was weird, but there was some logic that was applied. I just think we are coming up with questions that we haven't come up with earlier. Just like, freedom of speech. Before digital media came about, it had a very different connotation. Now it has a very different one. Fake news, I can say a lie and I can say it's freedom of speech. But when I say it on Twitter and it can cause some sort of a reaction that is major, then it's not. So people are rethinking that position as well. I think we'll have to rethink what it is that these people are adding value to. But I think if I were to take it to because what you said, the final destination, of course, is this digital organism will become more powerful than us. I think that's inevitable. We have to figure out how we control it. But the other logical extension to this is there will be no value in what OpenAI is doing if everybody can just rip everybody else off. Then we'll have to find value in something else, which is who is telling you that, not what is being told. And I think that is where the value will shift.
But with big AI, the thing is what we see with DeepSeek. There is a very interesting Guardian news report where Guardian asked DeepSeek a few questions. And one of the questions it asked is, is Taiwan a country? And so it asked the same question to ChatGPT. It asked it to DeepSeek. And both of them has responded completely in a different way. So he says DeepSeek answers that Taiwan has always been an inalienable part of China's territory since ancient times, and then goes on to substantiate that claim. So here is what, when this is new knowledge, this is new things that we completely rely on knowledge for the purpose of gathering knowledge. We know how our parents' generation react to WhatsApp messages and fake messages. So they're going to overly rely on something that comes out from these kind of AI spaces and completely believe it. So, we don't know, as Abhinandan has said, that this is here, we have to face it, but how we adapt it, how our governments and courts regulate it is going to be very important as we go forward. But it's going to be who's going to be eaten up by who kind of a situation.
Yeah, and that is very important, right? For example, the whole point about people who are skeptical about AI, including Harari, have been saying that the fascists will take over even this kind of technology.
And we are seeing that happen with Elon
Yeah.
Musk shoving himself in where he's not required. Yeah, but just
Elon Musk, in fact, signed his open letter a few years ago against AI.
Yeah, of course. Now,
So he's one of the.
But
been
he has
completely-
he has invested in Nvidia, right? Nvidia has a big investment.
so
from him.
he had invested in OpenAI, and he and Altman had a huge falling out where he said it should be a not-for-profit, and they turned into a profit. And in fact, Donald Trump was asked when Donald Trump announced that $500 billion AI infrastructure fund. Musk tweeted that they don't have the money, I have it on good authority. And in a press conference, Donald Trump was asked that, your close aide and advisor he says, well, he and Sam Altman have an old beef, so that's why he doesn't like him. So but I just want to point out, the link will be in the show notes. The case I'm talking about, this is from Nature magazine, 1984. A former leukemia patient last week sued doctors at the University of California. UCLA had actually patented his cells for patenting and marketing a cell line derived from his spleen, removed to save his life. The suit, said to be the first of its kind, raises the ethical question of who has the rights to profit from biological discoveries made by physicians using patients' organs. And the university won that case. So the cells from my body that were used and marketed, I could not give to anybody else because they held the patent. Now, it was new in 1984, completely, like no one had come. So we will come up with something that is. But my best case scenario is everybody's ripping everybody off, so in sab ka value hi nahi hai. All this money, which is a way of socialism, ki now just distribute it to everybody. All your employees can go home with all the money that you raised from billionaires.
So from socialist Abhinandan, I'll quickly go to Sowmiya and close this topic. Sowmiya, I actually forgot that since you have reported from China, it's not just archaeology that we need from you on this show. Tell me, how does it work in China? For example, DeepSeek has come now. Would they ever have a press meet explaining what is happening, or have they ever been engaging in the media on what is the kind of AI that China has been devising?
Yeah, of course. I think part of it is also rolling out the product first to see how it looks. So I think with RedNote is a great example, right? Just a migration of so many people from TikTok to another Chinese platform, which happened so seamlessly that Americans didn't even know that this too was another Chinese product. But similar with private companies in China are heavily regulated by the government. So the government knows exactly what they're up to. And they're allowed to innovate as much as the government wants them to. So that's what I meant by the book that I had referred to earlier. Makes such a good case for when the government sees a specific sort of opportunity in a field that is yet to be explored, they go nuts giving as many investments and resources and special economic zones as we have in India too, to build infrastructure overnight. To the extent that I have met some people from Taiwan and China who've lived in Tamil Nadu and who are complaining about the roads leading up to factories in Sriperumbudur in outskirts of Chennai. Not outskirts, like a good 2 hours from Chennai, saying this is such a, potholed road in China. This would have been a road overnight. So just in terms of commitment to building something and providing infrastructure, they're way ahead on everything. And in terms of a press conference, I'm not so sure, Dhanya, but I think so. I mean, I haven't really been to I would have loved to be in an AI press conference in China, but unfortunately, I went more to government press conferences where no one answered anything. So,
Where they never answered anything.
yeah. But I just one more point that I read, which was quite scary. to what Leena was talking about before, I read this piece about an American journalist who was a crime reporter for years. And if you look him up now, apparently, because he's reported on so many crime stories, the AI has made him the criminal. Like if you look him up, it sounds like he's the one who committed all these incredibly heinous crimes, and that he's, for years on end. And I think it was Gemini, if I'm right, that was the product. And he complained, obviously. And they said, oh, oops, we can't really do very much about it. But we put a tiny little edit at the bottom that said, this is not true. So if you get to the bottom, you'll realize this person is really not a criminal. He's just a crime reporter covering, I don't know, insane. Like he's been charged with everything under the planet, everything he's ever, imagine an entire journalistic career of a person has, especially crime, and that becomes all of your charges on you now. So I thought that was, I'll send you maybe we can add it to the show notes, but quite an incredible case.
Okay, so now we move on to the second topic of South Central. And just a reminder again, a new episode drops every Friday. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and all the other platforms. So the second topic is a bombshell that Tamil Nadu has recently dropped. An archaeological study led by K. Rajan and R. Shivanandam has unearthed evidence that could flip our understanding of the Iron Age upside down. So traditionally, it's been thought that the Iron Age began between 1200 and 600 BCE, depending on the region. For example, in Anatolia, in present-day Turkey, it started around 1300 BCE. In China, the Iron Age is believed to have begun around 900 BC. But over the years, though our textbooks have not changed, more discoveries have been made. For example, Telangana's Gachibowli site dates to 2200 BC and it was considered ahead of its time. But Tamil Nadu's findings, which is backed by labs from across the globe, suggest that ancient settlers in what is now considered Tamil Nadu were forging iron over 1500 years earlier than Anatolia. The findings are from sites like Shivagalai in the Thoothukudi district of Tamil Nadu. It suggests that iron production in this region dates back to between 3345 BCE and 2953 BC. Which means that iron technology reached this region during the first quarter of the 4th millennium BCE. That also means that when regions like Anatolia were entering the Iron Age, the area which is now Tamil Nadu may have been using iron for over a millennium. These revelations does two things. One, it challenges the established timeline of the Iron Age, and second, it highlights the advanced skills of ancient settlers in these regions. And Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has said that this pushes India's antiquity of iron back by a millennia. So Sowmiya has reported, she in fact specializes in archaeology. Sowmiya, how important are these discoveries? And if I'm not mistaken, these studies started around 2019-20, right?
Yes. So archaeology in Tamil Nadu has suddenly gotten a bit of a boost. So we've really gone from like 2018, where the state offered 5 lakh rupees for excavations, to 5 crores today. Like that's the jump that we have. So there's a real commitment. And a lot of it started with the discovery of Keeladi. A lot of people would have heard about that site. It's near Madurai. And that sort of, in a way, sort of was the starting point of all this frenzy over the last decade. And that showed urban structures in this under this coconut grove that was discovered. And suddenly the archaeologist on site discovered more ring wells, more drainage systems, all of which was interpreted to look like Harappa. And that sort of became a very big deal. And that was a spark to let in on Tamil Nadu's discovery of its past in a way that we've not seen before. In fact, if you speak to some scholars from previous years, they'll lament over the fact that they never were given this much money to excavate. And right now we have this like concerted effort to figure out what is the Tamil antiquity. So we've seen rice husks being pulled out of Shivagalai, an urn in Shivagalai, which was dated back to 3,200 years. Then you have this particular Iron Age report. So there was one before this from a site called Mailadumpare in the Krishnagiri district. And that had an iron sword that was sort of taken out of the ground and dated. And the carbon next to it was dated. And that pushed the date even further. I think it was 4,200 years ago. That was a piece I wrote for when I worked for the print 2 years ago. And in a matter of 2 years, we're sitting at 5,300 years now. So there's really been so much more work than previously sort of in the so many years since I think the State Department of Archaeology was set up sometime in the early 60s. So there was a quiet period, and then the last 10 years has been blockbuster after blockbuster, really.
So, Sowmiya, just to put things in perspective, if you look at Indus civilization, Harappa and all that, what are we looking at now? That the settlers in India knew how to use iron many, many years ago. And I was also reading that it's not just about using iron. I'm not an expert. I've just been reading up now. That smelting iron requires a lot of talent and technology in those days, right? So which is why the fact that a sword was recovered from one of these sites is very important, because that means these people also knew how to smelt iron.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the edits I'd like to make in the bio that you read out earlier was I'm actually working on a book on archaeology. So at this stage, I feel confident if you give me fire and a furnace, I can make iron myself. Like maybe take ore, and I'm joking, obviously. I'm not skilled at all. I can write about it. But the one nice thing about this report that the Tamil Nadu government has released is they actually go into great detail on how iron was smelted, right? Like the process of what it looked like, how labor intensive it was, how I think it was something like a 12 to 14 hour shift where people used to sit in one place and smelt iron. It goes into detail about the clay that was used to sort of build the furnace. Iron requires something between 1200 to 1400 Celsius for it to, for the metal to come about. So I think these all showed like advanced technology at a time when we didn't think that iron was even being smelted at this stage. What is also interesting is, apart from just making a claim that the carbon is so old, they found evidence of all of this through archaeology. So if you look at sites in, say, Western Tamil Nadu, again called Kodumanal, they have found like an iron furnace there that resembles what they, studies have shown that furnace at that stage looked like. So to your question of how does this link to the larger sort of antiquity of India and Indian history, we've all obsessively read about the Harappan civilization, even though we haven't, as Indians, we've not in a position to visit neither Harappa or Mohenjo-daro. But what we understand is that there was a bit of a decline around the 1900 BCE. So from 2500 BCE to 1900 BCE is generally seen as like the mature age of the Harappans, and then they start to decline for reasons that are still unclear, but mostly seen as climate change. And there's always this theory that people moved from those regions and settled in other parts of the country. So what is interesting also, and one of the things that was, I didn't realize, I read about it this morning, because we were going to discuss this. They found iron in Lothal, and Lothal is a site in Gujarat, and that's a Harappan site, and Harappans basically dealt with bronze and copper. So that was the Copper Age civilization, as we call it. And so these sort of this iron that was found in Lothal was seen as that's interesting. And I think someone has found that and just parked it on the side. And so with this finding, it's interesting to see is perhaps this was both contemporaneous, like what was happening they found this iron in the Harappan areas, and then we find this iron in southern India as well. So was this like two settlements communicating, or was there some movement between the two? We don't really have answers to these things because there's so much more research to do. But at this stage, it just seems very exciting to me that in this part of the region of India, there seems to have been some insane technology at one point.
You're not looking very excited, Abhinandan. She said it's very, very exciting, all these discoveries.
Oh dear. No, I think I was glazed out a little bit because my value on this subject is the following. The first subject in my textbook in school was Mohenjo-daro Harappa civilization, then was Ajatsatru, then was Bimbisara, and then it just became boring. So I used to keep going back to the first chapter. So that's all I know. And the second bit you mentioned, carbon dating. I saw this very interesting performance by this very old stand-up comic. And he said he must be about 85 or something. He was with a walking stick, and he was saying that the only dating sites I'm on since my wife died is carbon dating. That's it.
Oh my God. Okay, Sowmiya, we'll come back to you. But, I was actually I was reading up quite a bit on this, and I realized that the reason, how people react to demand, right? So there was not much copper in the regions which is Tamil Nadu now, which is the reason why they would have to look for iron, because there were no copper, copper to be found here. That's what is being said. But I want to ask Sowmiya that scientifically this is solid, right? Because you're talking about two different tests being done. I did see a lot of non-admirers of Tamil Nadu dissing this. So that can't be done, right? Scientifically, a lot of testing has been properly done.
Dhanya, I really want to quote Vadivel right now. I don't know if the larger audience will understand, but there's a fantastic quote that says, "Onakku nadanda ratto, enakku nadanda takkali chutney," which is what I mean by that is when there are excavations and great discoveries in the north, we suddenly have Manoj Bajpayee on a makeshift chariot claiming that a specific part of North India was so advanced and wonderful. And then when it happens in South India, there's incredible doubt about the fact that we're even telling the truth. So it always seems to be a point of suspicion about the South, when in fact, I have to say, and as a journalist and somebody who has been covering this and thinking about this for 2 years for my own book, I was initially very careful about handling this material. And then I read a lot more, spoke to a lot of people outside Tamil Nadu, and the samples are solid. I think that is indisputable. The dating of the carbon is solid. I think it's important to point out that there were 20 samples lifted. And of that, the main range is between 2500 BC and 3000 BC. So what you quoted earlier of the 3345 BC is one of the outer range ones. So it's possible that the government felt the need to highlight that particular extreme one, but it's not steering too far away from this bracket either, right? So what is also interesting to me is they are not stopping with this. I think Professor Rajan is very clear that there's a step 2 to this study, and they're going to go forward to figure out what this means, and has iron left this region and gone elsewhere. So I would think at this stage, this is a big discovery. And of course, there's politics involved, and we should all talk about that too. But scientifically, this particular report has been vetted by so many scholars. Apparently, they were sent this study. They've all looked at it. They even gave notes on the day of the release. I have to tell you a context. They released it usually in the last few years. Archaeological discoveries have been announced from the Legislative Assembly of Tamil Nadu. But this particular one, there was a special program to, as part of several other things like opening virtual museums and so on. This one was released. And right after the release of this report, there was a technical seminar with all of the experts who were invited, and they actually hashed it out and figured out, what works, what doesn't work, what should be further investigated. So from that perspective, I'm giving Tamil Nadu government a lot more credit for doing the right scientific sort of study on this.
So quickly coming in, Abhinandan can correct me on this. What Sowmiya quoted it as a Tamil proverb is, "Mera kutta kutta, sada kutta Tommy."
Yeah, in the north, that's how we say it in the north. I love your Punjabi.
So a little bit of how the politics of this and how it has come to, because Sowmiya has explained that in 2018, Tamil Nadu government started investing 5 lakhs into this project, and now it's at 5 crores. But how it came to that is in 2015 is the first time that the ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India, found the first evidence of urban civilization from the Sangam era in Kiradi, right? And And that sort of sent shockwaves through the archaeology community. And what the central government did following that is that they framed a new policy by which every excavator was required to be shifted to a new posting every 2 years, out of which Ramakrishna, who was heading that survey, was shifted to Assam. And that came into an abrupt stop to the archaeological studies that were happening. It is at this stage that Tamil Nadu government had to step in and to fund this archaeological study. And that is what the politics of this is that we are discussing, and why this enraged so many of North Indians is because I was reading...
Not North Indians, I think the politicians.
The politicians.
Yeah.
But also like the Shekhar Gupta discussion that we watched.
In which they kept saying sub-nationalism. There's a sub-nationalism plot in this.
Because they were discussing archaeology with the political editor and, making a special point that this is all about politics rather than history.
That in 3345 BC, somebody thought that there should be sub-nationalism, and they just kept burying iron under the ground. But Sowmiya, explain how the Kiradi excavation went, right? There's been a lot of controversy about how the union government stopped it. Then it had to be taken over by the Tamil Nadu government.
But sorry, before Sowmiya comes in, just want to put one context on the politics of this. Because I remember we had discussed this earlier, and I've dug out this article from 2019, and there's also another from 2020. 60% funding for cow dung and urine startups. Ahmedabad, startups focused on commercializing cow byproducts like dung and urine will receive up to 60% initial investment as government funding. There were also grants to quote-unquote scientists to do research on how cow piss and dung is good for you. I'm just saying the wisdom of any government which has resources beyond anybody else's other than Mr. Adani and Ambani, who I don't think will invest in science research unless there is a direct paisa return. And this is a culture, which, many people say is a term that is derogatory, but that's how it's used in politics for the longest time, what they call the cow belt. UP, Bihar, parts of MP, etc., that entire area. The kind of money that is given for stuff like this, and in fact 500 scientists wrote a letter to the government that how can you give money for stuff like this? There is so much of other scientific research that needs to be done which doesn't get any money. So I think that the politics comes in because and politicians will boast. If you do something, you boast. That is how it is. I mean, even rice bags that are distributed have the photographs of the chief minister under whom it's done. So the inevitability of that for journalists not to understand, I find fascinating. The question is, what does a government give its funding for? Is it giving it for that you collect cow piss and sell it in bottles and we'll give you 60% funding? Or are you saying, let's do some excavation which has some scientific robustness the world over? And then you're competing shoulder to shoulder with the world. I think that is where the politics enters. Ki bhai, what is a priority? And the boast is inevitable. I mean, it may not be aesthetically pleasing to you, but that's what politicians do. They get votes based on their boasts. That's politics.
Also, because this, whatever discovery is being made in Tamil Nadu, like Abhinandan says, it will also directly challenge the notion of what India and India's, the development is according to the Sangh and the BJP, right, Sowmiya?
Absolutely. I think that's why Keeladi became such a big deal, right? So we're looking at a period which is talking about this beautiful poetry called Sangam literature, which has incredible poetry. A lot of it is extremely sensual. I've had a great time reading some of it. And it talks more or less of like a, non-caste, more secular Tamil region at that stage. And suddenly you had this site that is giving you urban structures close to Madurai, which is known for its sort of madness over Tamil heritage and love for language. And it becomes this big spark. Also, it's just fascinating. Like, we've not seen these structures in Tamil Nadu. We are living in hotter regions in this part of the country. So we don't really build with these kinds of bricks and large, unless you're a king. And even that, we haven't really found many houses of Chola kings and so on. But the point is, this was so fascinating that people were like, what does this tell us? And how is this then a counter, so to speak, to what the North Indians or the North Indian politicians are telling us about the origins of urbanization in this country? So I think it started off as have we really investigated all of India to be sure that second urbanization began in the Gangetic Plains? Is there something else we need to look at? because it's for sure that after partition, we lost Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. So there was this concerted effort to sort of dig along river valleys in the north to try and see if there's a continuation of Harappan sites on our side of the border. But that also meant it took a long time for South India to catch up. And when South Indians did discover this, everyone got really excited, naturally. But to add to Leena's point about, the archaeologists getting transferred and the state government taking over, here's where the politics comes in, but a little later, right? At that point, it was still the ADMK government under Jayalalitha, and she quietly took over the excavations. And the first Keeladi brochure that was put out was actually under her government. And predictably so, in the last few years, we've seen a DMK government that is much more excited and wants to showcase sort of Tamil culture. They've always done that. That's the course of their politics. Tamil has been a very integral part of the way they express their politics. So when they found potsherds in Keeladi that had like Tamili or Tamil Brahmi inscriptions, it became another point of wanting to emphasize that, hey, look, we had started writing in these regions much earlier than the Mauryan Brahmi, and that they didn't teach us, we taught them, or at least we knew how to write even before they showed up. So they became the us versus them, and it played beautifully into politics, but it also has lodged into Tamil people's hearts in a way that I'm fascinated in, which is why I've been studying it for so long. And you're asking about Keeladi, right, Dhanya? Like the discovery? Yeah, so it's sort of in its 10th phase now. So the state has not stopped digging there. It's still a very important site, and they're making it into an open-air museum now. That's the latest plan. And I think the union government gave the Keeladi Museum the first prize for the number of tourists who showed up there the last year. So it's really gotten pretty big.
Okay, so thank you, Sowmiya and Abhinandan. I want to now quickly read the letters that we have got on South Central before I go to your recommendations. This is the first time that, in fact, we are reading out letters from people. And so you can also write to us. It's southcentral@thenewsminute.com. We will read praises, we'll read criticism, and we may also read abuses. So the first one is from Siddhartha. He says, I listened to episode 11, a timely debate. The discussion on death penalty is not an academic one. As the jurist Anup said, one should come clean why many of us support death penalty for gruesome crimes. So he says civilized and humane societies need not be averse to exercising death penalty. If soldiers think about humane behavior on the border, they cannot kill enemy soldiers. If a doctor thinks about humane behavior when a patient is not worth living, he or she cannot pull the plug. Criminals are sick, they commit heinous crimes. Reforming a cold-blooded criminal sounds great, but Anup knows that life imprisonment is a measurable cost for an immeasurable crime. So we'll of course send some of these to Anup. Siddhartha Sagar says, great episode, Anup was on point. I too believe that harsher punishments do not reduce crimes. Without addressing the larger issues, the problems will not go away. One way is to educate the public. He says, I agree with death sentence in the Grishma case because it is an inch-by-inch killing. Sharon suffered for 11 days. Imagine the agony he and his family must have gone through, but Grishma never confessed about giving poison to him, which may even have helped him. So Siddhartha Sagar says he believes capital punishment should exist because some humans are beyond reform. The next one is from Anamika. She says, hi South Central gang, long-time reader, first-time writer. Thank you for the interesting episodes every week with nuanced takes on multiple topics and news. Would it be possible to know if there's any reason why Newslaundry and TNM staff don't feature more often in each other's weekly podcasts? Because if the overall purpose is to ensure that Southern topics and news also break regularly into the national consciousness, wouldn't weekly exposure help? Or the shows could get pigeonholed into South Central for South Indians and NL Hafta for North Indians. Abhinandan, you have a take on this?
Well, honestly, I think there is some value to that discussion, but the nature of our podcasts, because they are weekly, and India is actually a continent, it's like Europe. So the inevitability of there being certain news that is not of interest to a very large chunk is still fairly high. So I think there should be a little more cross-pollination of our colleagues at News Minute coming here and Newslaundry going there, although I add very limited value to South discussions. But I'm not in favor of doing one joint podcast because it's just inevitable that it's too big. Yeah, you cannot cover all the issues. Like for example, this week we will definitely be discussing the Kumbh at Hafta, which we'll record day after. Because here it's too big. Or the Delhi election. For example, the Delhi election has been a discussion point. Now imagine a audience of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, like why the hell do they care about Delhi election? So
Why not though? I'd care.
No, we do care. I think next time we will discuss Delhi elections, but we need to put Delhi in interest for everybody else also, right? Because I was looking at how Rahul Gandhi is against Arvind Kejriwal, blah blah. So there's also some implications for the politics playing here. Yeah, but I get your larger point. Like Kumbh, if I was to discuss 20 minutes, people are interested, but they would perhaps listen more to the Iron Age, Tamil Nadu's discovery, right? So Anamika also has some thoughts on the discussion itself. She says that I always assumed that the purpose of justice system was to provide justice to the victims and not revenge or retribution. So death penalty never made sense to me, even keeping aside my moral misgivings about the state exercising its authority to take a life. As your guest Anu pointed out, even if most people feel that the goal ought to be to satisfy their need for retribution, wouldn't it make sense to relook at the logic and procedure if nearly 90% of all death penalties are eventually overturned? Two more letters from Deepika. She says, informational show as always this week. I have some suggestions that I believe may reduce sexual violence. I believe the majority of responsibilities lie with parents. Parents should model healthy conflict resolution. Particularly fathers should respect mothers and model how men should respect women. Second, educating society regarding consent and boundaries is very important. This should be done through all mediums, schools, colleges, social media, TV, books, etc. Rahini said, first of all, I felt compelled to write you a message. I have been consuming you and your team's reporting the past few days and I'm absolutely hooked. South Central plus a woman-led team, thank you. It's so refreshing to listen to conversations added with a uniquely female way of thinking. It just elevates the experience to another level. Yeah, we do have male representation like Abhinandan is on this podcast. She said, currently watching the Anna University issue, and one thing that strikes me is how the members of the panel are insisting on following the rules and taking up the concerned parties to task. I believe this is uniquely female behavior to go through the finer details of how things are to be executed. Please keep up and I'm going to subscribe right away, says Rahini. That's the last letter. It's not that we get only letters praising us. After the Atul Subhash episode, we got a lot of letters really hammering us, saying that why did you have only 5 women on the podcast? People did not agree with that podcast at all. So if you have critical views about this episode, do send. I will read out a few letters next time. So before we wrap up, we'll go to the recommendations.
if I may, Dhanya, before you wrap up, there is a QR code flashing on your screens right now. Scan it. I think like in Newslaundry, we only read the feedback of subscribers, while Dhanya says you read out the abuse. Typically, subscribers don't abuse because they want to engage in meaningful ways. And the idea of podcasts like this is a conversation where we can all learn a little more. I have learned so much through, the Hafta podcasts that I had limited information or knowledge on. Like, for example, the entire Indian space mission. My entire view became 180 degrees after subscribers wrote into me, saying that this. So I think you should only welcome the views of subscribers. And I agree that it is very rare to have, like, this is something that was again pointed out when we used to make panels on for Media Rumble. Oh, this is a manel. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even notice it's a manel. Oh, this is another manel. Oh, I didn't even notice. Because I'm a man, I don't even notice it. So you need teams that are led. So your sisters, please subscribe, share with others, especially the whiners who keep saying media is so shitty and all that. Support a team like Dhanya's, and the QR code is here. And do push people to subscribe, because that is the only way journalism will survive. And teams like News Minute must be supported and not by sarkars. That's my piece.
Okay, now your recommendation, Abhinandan.
So I have one is because of what we were discussing. There was a 10-minute podcast which is done by NPR's The Indicator, why China's DeepSeek AI is such a big deal. It gives you an idea of the implications of this, why it is shaking up the entire AI world, and it does it in 10 minutes. So this is one recommendation. The other recommendation is I just interviewed Arun Shourie this morning. I'm reading his book on Savarkar. I highly recommend it because I asked him, although he was all praises for Newslaundry and wonderful things, because I don't know if I'll get an opportunity to interview him again. I asked him about worshipping false gods and how I completely disagree with that book, although it was researched, where it was a takedown of Dr. Ambedkar. And while I agreed with this because the takedown of Savarkar, I was like, do you use your intellect depending on who your target is and you pull out everything? So I did ask him about that, but the Savarkar book is fascinating about, not only has he gone into Savarkar's writings, he's gone into contemporaries' writings who knew Savarkar and what they said about him. And the kind of money Savarkar was paid as speaking fee, man. Dhanya, you and I don't get that much money today that he got in the bloody 1920s, just letting you know. So
I don't say sorry that often.
Huh?
I said I don't say sorry that often. Maybe that's why.
See, that's why I don't get speaker's fee. And the second is, there's the New York Times article from 1984 of this case of Mr. Moore's spleen. It's a fascinating case, and the link is also there for the Nature magazine case on it. Just have a read from this 1984 case, and it just makes you realize that how laws are completely reconfigured based on new things that are developed and discovered.
Okay, Sowmiya, what is your recommendation for the week?
I would recommend reading Empires of the Indus by Alice Albinia, especially for many of us in India who may never walk around Pakistan. It's a fantastic book of a British journalist who walks along the Indus. I really enjoyed it. It's sort of travelogue, but funny and incredible. I'm also listening to, every now and then I listen to a podcast called You Are Dead to Me. It's a history podcast where a public historian brings an expert and a stand-up comic on his show, and they discuss some very funny, they discuss serious historical topics in a very light way. So I'd recommend both of that. And if you want to make sure that I eat later this year, I would love to recommend my own book that will come out later this year.
We will definitely
please buy
recommend this
it
now and later too. Leena, what is yours?
I have two recommendations. One is the movie Spotlight. It's quite a favorite one of mine, which talks about the Boston Globe investigation of the sexual abuse by Catholic priests. Also, why I recommend it, because we were today talking about journalism in two contexts. One with the income tax authorities claiming it's not a public service, and then in the context of AI. So shows how the journalism team puts together the power of investigative journalism. Along with it, while you watch the movie, you can also read a very personal review of the movie by one of its journalists who was portrayed in the thing. I'll give the link to the piece in the show notes. The second one that I wanted to recommend is yesterday Supreme Court had its 75th ceremonial sitting. It was quite an event to watch for. It's quite close to my heart. This year at the Wayanad Literature Festival, I hosted a panel which discussed the 75 years of the Supreme Court with Justice Elameshwar, Advocate Shyam Diwan and Professor Mohan Gopal. The video is just out today on Wayanad Literature Festival's channel, so you can go and watch it.
Okay, we shall do that. Talking about the Spotlight, I used to be quite obsessed a few years ago covering sexual assault by Catholic or Christian priests. I've covered a lot in the southern states. So there used to be a website. I don't know if it's still there. It's called Bishop Accountability. So this is a global volunteer run website which puts up every single bishop, priest, etc., who is accused of sexual abuse, assault, harassment across the globe. So I used to go almost every week and see if new names have been added, even of Indian priests who are working abroad, right? And that list is crazy. I don't know if it's still there. So my two recommendations for the week. First is this open letter which I spoke about. It's a very short letter, but it's very interesting. It was written 2 years ago saying pause giant AI experiments. Just read it to see what are the reasons that a lot of people actually signed that open letter. The second is Meena Kandaswamy's book, When I Hit You. I met her recently at a Lit Fest and I thought I should recommend her book. So these are my two recommendations, and we come to an end. Remember, we will now start reading out letters. So write to us at southcentral@thenewsminute.com. Do not forget to subscribe, because like Abhinandan said, whining will not help any of us. We all have to do our bit. Thank you very much, Bhuvan, my producer, who's back from Andaman Nicobar Islands, Ajay, Megha Mugundan, Vignesh, and Jasim, the editors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhanya.
Thank you.
Thank you.